My name is Madison Hart, and if you had asked me that morning how my life was going, I would have said something like, busy, a little stressful, but good, solid. I had a good job, a house I'd bought on my own 2 years earlier, a boyfriend I'd been with for 3 years, living with me for the last 18 months. We weren't perfect, but we were us, comfortable, warm, familiar. And I was about to ask him to marry me. I chose his favorite Italian restaurant, the one he talked about like it was a second home, the place where he'd said more than once, if anyone ever proposed to me here, I'd probably cry like a baby. This place just feels right, you know? He'd sent me ring photos as jokes, pointed out proposal videos, made comments at other people's weddings that sounded a lot like hints. I believed him. The ring box in my purse felt like a brick. 3 months of my salary, custom designed to match the exact style he'd shown me on his phone more than once. I'd watched the jeweler put the stones in, traced the outline of the band with my thumb, imagined his face when I opened it. The restaurant had dimmed the lights for the evening crowd. There was this warm glow over everything. Candles, low music, the clink of glasses. I'd called ahead, asked them to play his favorite song when dessert came. They'd been thrilled to help. When the first notes of that song floated through the speakers, my heart started pounding so loud I could feel it in my throat. Mad, you okay? Ryan asked, looking at me over the candle between us. Ryan, my boyfriend. Dark hair, easy smile, the kind of guy who made everyone around him feel relaxed. The guy I'd pictured at the other end of every future plan I'd allowed myself to make. I pushed my chair back and stood up. My hands were shaking, but I smiled anyway as I moved around the table and got down on one knee. Conversations around us started to fade. A few people turned their heads. I could feel the entire room begin to hold its breath. Ryan, I said, and my voice sounded small in my own ears, but somehow still carried. I love you. I've loved you through apartment upgrades and job changes and late night panic attacks and Sunday morning coffee runs. I want to love you for the rest of my life. Will you marry me? I opened the ring box. He looked at it, then at me, and then he laughed. Not a startled, nervous little chuckle, not a teary, overwhelmed laugh. A full-on laugh, head thrown back, shoulders shaking, eyes watering. Oh my God, he said between laughs. Wait, you're serious? I thought you were joking. The restaurant went completely silent. I stayed there, kneeling on the floor, holding out the ring like an idiot, waiting for the moment he'd realize what he was doing and stop, waiting for him to say, I'm sorry, I panicked, or, yes, of course, or anything that didn't make my entire body feel like it was on fire. He didn't stop. Madison, he said, still half laughing, get up, you're embarrassing yourself. That word, yourself, hit harder than you'd think, as if he had nothing to do with it. As if I'd built this entire scene alone, out of nowhere, and he was some innocent bystander. My knees hurt, my face burned. I could feel strangers staring. Someone cleared their throat. Somewhere in the back, a fork clinked against a plate. I closed the ring box, my fingers clumsy and numb, and pushed myself back up to my feet. I didn't say anything. Where are you going? Ryan asked as I picked up my purse. I still didn't answer. I turned, walked through the quiet restaurant with all those eyes drilling into my back, and stepped out into the cool night air before I started shaking. I don't really remember the drive to my other place. Everyone thought I'd given up that small one-bedroom apartment across town when Ryan moved into my house, but I hadn't. I'd kept it, not for any dramatic reason. At least that's what I told myself. It was just easier to keep the lease a little longer. A backup, a habit. That night, backup suddenly felt like the smartest thing I'd ever done. By the time I walked into the dark, slightly stale-smelling apartment, my phone was already buzzing nonstop in my bag. I didn't look at it. I just dropped my purse on the couch, sat down in the dark, and stared at nothing. 3 years. 3 years of building a life with someone who thought the idea of me proposing to him was a joke. My phone lit up again, then again. It felt like the entire room was pulsing with his name. I finally pulled it out. Missed calls, texts. What the hell, Madison? Come back. We need to talk. Are you seriously mad about this? Okay, this is getting dramatic. I put the phone face down on the coffee table and let the silence swallow it. For maybe an hour, I did nothing. No crying, no screaming, just sitting. Letting the timeline of our relationship replay in my head like a movie someone had secretly recut. The jokes about marriage being a trap. The way he always said, you're the stable one. If anyone's going to propose, it'll be you. like it was hypothetical. The Pinterest photos he'd sent me, ironically. The comments at his friend's wedding. Don't get any ideas, Mad. I'm not ready to be somebody's husband. Red flags lined up neatly, now suddenly lit from behind. I got up. If I stayed in that numb limbo any longer, I knew I'd cave. I'd drive back. I'd let him talk over me. I'd let him spin it into me overreacting. I'd apologize for being hurt. I wasn't going to do that. I opened my laptop and did what my brain does best when it's hurt. I made a list. Call lawyer. Call bank. Call airline. Call jeweler. I dialed my lawyer first. It felt ridiculous, calling him the same night my boyfriend laughed at my proposal. But that ridiculous feeling was drowned out by something colder, a firm, quiet voice in my head saying, "Protect yourself." "Madison," he said when he picked up, sounding more surprised than annoyed. "Is everything okay?" "No," I said calmly. "I need to know my rights about removing someone from my property. Boyfriend, not married. Name not on deed or mortgage. He's been living there 18 months. He was quiet for a beat. "All right," he said. "Let's walk through it. You'll need to give written notice. 30 days. Document everything. Don't change the locks before that unless there's a safety issue. Keep it clean and legal." We went over the details. I wrote everything down. Date, wording, steps. When I hung up, I felt a little less like I was drowning. Second call, my bank. I had added Ryan as an authorized user on one of my credit cards a year ago. For emergencies, I'd said. He'd used it for a lot of things that were not emergencies. Brunches, sneakers, concert tickets. "I'd like to remove an authorized user," I said. My voice didn't even shake. They walked me through it. His access was gone in minutes. Third, the airline. We had a vacation booked for next month. Couples trip, cute hotel, joint excursions, non-refundable deposit. "Cancel it," I said. "All of it." "There will be a fee," the woman warned. "That's fine." Fourth, the jeweler. "What's your return policy?" I asked, fingers tightening around the ring box in my hand. 14 days for an 80% refund, the man replied, "as long as it's not been worn or altered." "Perfect," I said. "Thank you." I checked the date, set a reminder in my phone. 2 weeks to decide whether to keep this very expensive symbol of my own humiliation in a drawer or get most of my money back and buy myself something less tragic. Maybe a ridiculous TV, or nothing. Maybe peace. Only then did I open Ryan's message thread. "What are you doing? Madison, answer me. Are you seriously punishing me for not wanting to get married yet? This is insane." I typed slowly, choosing every word like it might be read out loud in court one day. "You made your feelings clear tonight. I'll be by tomorrow to discuss you moving out of my house." Then I hit send. Then I blocked his number. The buzzing didn't stop. Unknown numbers. His sister. His friends. A coworker. I turned the phone off, placed it face down again, and leaned back on the couch. I stared at the ceiling. Somewhere under the numbness, under the humiliation, something else settled in. Something hard and steady. He'd laughed when I was on my knees. I wasn't going to forget that. I wasn't going to let him stay. By the time the sun came up the next morning, the numbness had turned into something sharper. Resolve. I showered, put on a clean blouse, tied my hair back, and printed the 30-day notice my lawyer had helped me draft. The language was cold and precise. To Ryan Cole, this is formal written notice to vacate the premises. It didn't mention the ring or the restaurant or the way my knees had hurt on the tile. It didn't have to. When I pulled into the driveway of my house, his car was already there. So were 2 others I recognized. His sister's beat-up sedan. His friend Nate's truck. Of course he wouldn't be alone. I unlocked the front door and stepped into my own living room. Ryan was on the couch, flanked by his younger sister Chloe and 2 of his friends. The TV was off. They were all just sitting there, waiting, like an intervention. All 3 sets of eyes turned to me. "We need to talk," I said, my hand still on the doorknob. "You blocked my number," Ryan snapped, standing up. "What the hell, Madison?" His voice was loud, a little too loud, like he needed volume to make up for what he'd done. "How dare you after what you pulled last night," Chloe added, crossing her arms. "Do you have any idea how humiliated he felt?" For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. "He felt humiliated," I repeated. Ryan ran a hand through his hair. "You blindsided me. You know I'm not ready for marriage. We've talked about this." "No," I said, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me. "You've joked about not being ready. You've sent me ring photos, ironically. You've dropped hints at every wedding we've been to in the last year. You told me if someone proposed to you at that restaurant, you'd cry." "That was clearly a joke," he said. Everyone knew it was a joke. I didn't, I said. I took you seriously. That's what people do when they love someone. Nate shifted on the couch. Mads, come on, you kind of ambushed him. Proposals are a big deal. Maybe have a conversation first? I looked at him. I thought 3 years of conversations counted. Chloe rolled her eyes. You guys are completely missing the point. She made a scene in public. People were staring. She made him look like an idiot. My hand tightened around the paper in my pocket. You laughed, I said to Ryan, for a full minute. Then you told me I was embarrassing myself. He opened his mouth, then shut it again. No apology. Just a flicker of something that looked a lot like annoyance. This is my house, I said quietly. My name is the only one on the deed. You're not on the mortgage. We are not married. So here's what's happening. I pulled the folded paper out of my pocket and held it out. He didn't take it. Chloe did, snatching it from my hand like she was doing him some kind of favor. What is this? She demanded. Formal notice to vacate, I said. You have 30 days to move your things out. This is insane, once of his friends said. You're really kicking him out because he was honest with you? He humiliated me in public, I said. He laughed at me on my knees in front of 50 people. I'm not going to keep living with someone who thinks my vulnerability is a punchline. You're such a child, Ryan shot back. This is why I'm not ready to marry you. You're petty and impulsive. Who calls a lawyer the same night? I did, I said, because I own this place, and I know exactly how this goes if I don't get ahead of it. Chloe was reading the notice now, her expression changing as she skimmed the legal language. Her voice dropped when she spoke again. Ryan, she said, this is legal. She can do this. He snatched the paper from her. His eyes moved faster, angry. I can't believe you're doing this, he said, over one mistake. One very public mistake where you turned me into a joke, I replied. Actions have consequences, Ryan. This is yours. He stepped closer. You don't get to decide that I'm homeless. You're not homeless, I said. You have parents, a sister, friends. You can rent. There are options. But you're not living in my house anymore. Chloe stood up too. At least give him more time. 60 days. 90. 30, I said. That's what the law requires. I'm already being generous by not asking you to leave today. You can't just throw me out, Ryan said, voice cracking around the edges now. We built this life together. The life in this house? I asked. I bought it before we even met. The equity is mine. The mortgage is mine. The property taxes are mine. You split utilities and groceries. You are not my co-owner. You're a guest who stopped respecting the host. His jaw clenched. You're going to regret this, he said. Everyone is going to see what kind of person you really are. Maybe, I said, but at least they'll see me standing up for myself. I stepped past him. I'm taking some of my clothes and documents, Ben, I added. I'll be sleeping at my apartment from now on. You have 30 days. Make arrangements. He followed me down the hall. You're overreacting, Sir Song, he said, his voice lower now, less performative without his audience. We can work this out. It was a stupid reaction. That's all. I panicked. You laughed, I said, opening the closet and pulling out a suitcase. You didn't panic. You enjoyed it. That's not fair. I stopped, looked at him. I gave you 3 years, I said. You gave me laughter when I was on my knees. We're done. He stared at me like he didn't recognize me. You're cold, he said eventually. You know that? Ice cold. Maybe, I said, folding clothes with deliberate calm, but I'm also done being a doormat. He kept talking, arguing, threatening, saying his dad was going to handle this, saying I'd ruined him, saying I'd be sorry when I was alone in that big empty house with no one who wants you. I ignored him, packed what I needed, grabbed my laptop, my important documents, a few framed photos I didn't want him to destroy in a tantrum, and walked back down the hall. Chloe and his friends were still in the living room. You're really doing this? Nate asked. Yeah, I said, I am. Chloe scoffed. You'll never find someone who puts up with you like he does. For a second, pain flared, old insecurity. Then something heavier settled on top of it. I hope not, I said, because I plan on finding someone who doesn't laugh when I tell them I want to spend my life with them. I walked out, loaded my suitcase into my trunk, and drove away. When I got back to the apartment, my phone was vibrating itself across the coffee table. I turned it on, long enough to see the notifications. Unknown numbers, his friends, his sister, and then turned it off again. For a week, I threw myself into work. Long hours, extra tasks, anything to fill the space. I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. The first sign that this was going to get messy came 3 days later. I walked out to the parking lot of my apartment building after a late shift and stopped dead. My car door had been keyed from front to back, 4 deep, jagged scratches like someone had taken a knife to it, all 4 doors. There was no note, no camera, just the sound of my own pulse in my ears. Coincidence, the rational part of my brain tried to argue. The rest of me knew better. The next day, my landlord called. Madison, he said, sounding uncomfortable. We've had a noise complaint. I blinked. From who? Neighbors. They're saying there's been loud music, parties, people coming and going at all hours from your unit. I work from home most days, I said slowly. I don't even own speakers. I've been in bed by 11 every night this week. He hesitated. I figured. Just had to let you know it was filed. I'll close it out, but if more come in, we'll have to look into it. After I hung up, I just sat there on the edge of my bed, phone in my hand, staring at the wall. Scratched car, fake noise complaints. Petty, small, childish. But it was only the beginning. 3 fraudulent charges hit my credit card the following week. 200 at a clothing website I'd never used. 300 at some electronics shop. Another 300 on random online orders. I hadn't used that card since I removed Ryan as an authorized user. I called the credit card company. Are you sure no one else has access? The representative asked. Yes, I said, then paused. Except, months ago, when I first gave him the card for emergencies, I'd watched him take a photo of it just in case. I'd laughed and called him paranoid. Not paranoid, prepared. For online transactions, someone would just need the numbers. The representative continued gently. We'll mark these as fraud and open an investigation. You won't be liable, but it may take some time. I thanked her, hung up, and pressed the heels of my hands into my eyes. I had given him access to my life, my home, my finances. Now he was taking little bites on his way out. And we still had 3 weeks left on that 30-day clock. When I drove to the house the next afternoon to pick up some paperwork from my office, my key didn't work. I tried the front door. Nothing. The deadbolt was new. For a moment, I just stood there on the porch, staring at the lock on a door I'd bought and painted myself. Then I pulled my phone out, scrolled to the number my lawyer had told me to use only if things escalated, and dialed. Call the police, he said. You have the deed, the notice to vacate, and your ID. You're the owner. He can't lock you out of your own property. So that's what I did. The officers were polite but tired-looking when they arrived. I showed them my driver's license, the deed, the notice I'd given Ryan. One of them knocked on the door. Ryan answered, looking shocked, and then instantly put upon. She's harassing me, he said. She's abusing me. She kicked me out, and now she's trying to break in. This is my house, I said, holding up the folder. He changed the locks without my permission. I'm still legally responsible for this property. The officer glanced between us, then took the papers from me, reading them slowly. He turned to Ryan. Sir, she's the owner, he said. You've been given legal notice to vacate, but you still have temporary occupancy. That doesn't give you the right to lock her out of her own home. She's making me homeless, Ryan protested. This is financial abuse. The officer sighed. Legal occupancy or not, she owns the place. She has every right to access her property. You need to let her in while she gets what she needs. After that, you two can figure out your arrangements. But if you keep her locked out, you're the one violating the law. They made him unlock the door. He stormed away as I stepped inside, muttering about controlling women and psychos who weaponize lawyers. I walked through every room like I was touring a crime scene. My office was untouched. My bedroom looked the same, except for a few things that were missing. His clothes, his guitars, his framed posters. The kitchen was clean, too clean, like he'd scrubbed it angrily. You're destroying my life, he said from the hallway, voice shaking. Where am I supposed to go? Your parents, I said. Your sister. A hotel. A roommate. Not my problem anymore. I can't afford rent on my own, you know that. You should have thought about that before laughing at me in public, I replied. He stared at me like I'd said something unforgivable. You're going to pay for this, he said quietly. You think people are going to take your side? They won't. They'll see what you really are. Maybe they would. Maybe they wouldn't. Either way, I was still changing the locks the second he was gone. The next week blurred into a slow, poisonous drip of chaos. Every day, something new went wrong. Never big enough to call the police, never provable enough to tie directly to Ryan, but always timed just so. Anonymous texts, a fake food delivery, a subscription service I never signed up for, all tiny, irritating blows meant to wear me down. But the real escalation started with his father. It was barely 10 a.m. when the receptionist at my office buzzed my desk. Madison, there's a gentleman here asking for you. I frowned. A client? A pause. He didn't say, but he's very insistent. I walked out to the lobby and stopped cold. Ryan's father, Mark Cole, stood near the front desk with his arms crossed, looking around like he owned the building. Tall, broad-shouldered, a permanent scowl carved into his face, and a presence that instantly set everyone on edge. He looked like the type of man who believed yelling was the same thing as winning an argument. When he saw me, he strode forward. "We need to talk," he said. "No, we don't," I replied, keeping my voice level. "You need to leave." He ignored that entirely. "You are making a mistake," he said, voice booming through the lobby. "My son told me everything. You're throwing away 3 years because he wasn't ready to get married to you on your timeline." I took a breath, slow, controlled. "Your son publicly laughed when I proposed," I said. "He humiliated me, and then he retaliated when I enforced boundaries about my own house." Mark scoffed. "Humiliated? You embarrassed him. What kind of woman proposes in a restaurant without warning? That's manipulative." I blinked. Manipulative. A word Ryan had always tossed out whenever he felt cornered. Now I knew where he'd learned it. "What happened is not your business," I said. "Please leave." He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a dangerous growl. "You're ruining my son's life," he hissed. "He told me you kicked him out with nowhere to go." "He has 30 days, I corrected. "I followed the law." "He said you threatened him," he shot back. "That you're controlling, that you trapped him financially." There it was, the smear narrative I knew Ryan was already spreading. I didn't bother arguing. "Leave," I repeated. He leaned in even closer. "If you don't reconsider, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of woman you really are." At that point, security approached. "Sir," one of the guards said, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Mark jerked back like he couldn't believe anyone dared talk to him. "Do you know who I am?" "Sir," the guard repeated calmly, "this is a private office. You need to go." He stared at me, eyes burning with an anger that wasn't about me at all. It was the anger of a man watching control slip through his fingers. "You'll regret this," he spat. Then he let the guard escort him out, shouting all the way down the hall. My boss called me into his office an hour later. "Everything okay?" he asked gently. I told him the truth. The proposal, the public humiliation, the fallout, the eviction, all of it. He ran a hand through his hair. "Jesus, Madison, I'm sorry." "I'm fine," I said. "I just didn't expect his dad to show up here." "If you need time off..." "No," I said. "Work is the only place I feel normal right now." He didn't argue, but the chaos didn't stop. That weekend, a coworker sent me a screenshot. Ryan had posted a long, dramatic update on social media. A crying selfie, a caption about financial abuse, a paragraph accusing me of evicting him to punish him for not rushing into marriage. Another about how he'd supported me emotionally for years, and I'd discarded him like trash. And the final straw? A GoFundMe link. Help Ryan rebuild after losing everything. The description said he'd been kicked out into the streets. He raised $312, mostly from strangers who had no idea they were funding a weaponized pity party. Then my mother called. "Sweetheart," she said, voice tight. "Your boyfriend's mother called me." "Ex-boyfriend," I corrected automatically. "She said you left him homeless and heartbroken, that he has nowhere to go." I paused. I gave him 30 days. "She didn't mention that?" "No," I said bitterly. "She wouldn't." "What really happened?" my mom asked softly. I swallowed. "He laughed at me, Mom," I said. "When I proposed. He laughed like it was a joke, said I was embarrassing myself." Silence. Then, "He what?" "Yep. That boy is lucky you didn't dump a plate of spaghetti on his head." A shaky laugh escaped me. The first in days. "Thank you," I whispered. "Don't thank me. Just promise me you're taking care of yourself." "I am." "Good. And don't you dare feel guilty about kicking out a man who mocked you when you were showing love. That's not a partner, that's a parasite." Move-out day arrived with a strange mix of tension and relief. I drove to the house with a cop waiting at the curb. Standard procedure, my lawyer recommended, just in case. I wasn't taking chances with another lock change stunt or public meltdown, but when I walked in, Ryan wasn't there. His sister, Chloe, was packing boxes in the living room, looking irritated and exhausted. "She can't face you," she said flatly. "She doesn't need to," I answered, "as long as her things are gone by tonight." "You're really doing this," she said, shaking her head. "Yep. She loved you, you know." A small, hollow ache fluttered in my chest. "Funny way of showing it," I murmured. We carried boxes out in tense silence, her muttering little insults under her breath the whole time. Cold, heartless, no compassion. I ignored all of it. When the moving truck was full, I stood in the driveway and held out my hand. "Keys," I said. Chloe frowned. "She's keeping one, just in case she forgot something." "No," I said. "All keys, now." "You're being paranoid." "Keys," I repeated. Finally, with a dramatic sigh, she slapped them into my palm. They drove away. I changed the locks within the hour. Then I went room to room, cleaning, wiping fingerprints off surfaces, gathering the last of his forgotten things, photos, a cheap necklace, a few paperback novels. I boxed them neatly and dropped the package off at his parents' house without knocking. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I just felt empty. The house didn't feel like mine yet. It felt like a war zone after the battle was over, quiet but still buzzing with leftover adrenaline. And I thought naively that maybe the worst was finally behind me. I was wrong. 2 days later, I got served. Ryan was suing me in small claims court for emotional distress, for financial damage, for forcing him to move, for contributions to the household. My lawyer laughed when he read the complaint. "This won't survive 5 minutes," he said, "but we'll show up." And we did. Ryan came with his father. No lawyer, just righteous indignation and a folder of absolutely nothing. The judge listened patiently, then asked questions. "Do you have a lease agreement?" "No." "Any proof she promised you ownership?" "No." "Any receipts showing financial contributions?" "No." "Any evidence she harassed or abused you?" "No." "Sir," the judge finally said, "you have no case. You were given legal notice. You do not have tenant rights beyond that. Case dismissed." Ryan sputtered. "This isn't fair. She ruined my life." "Court is adjourned," the judge said briskly. His father started arguing until the judge threatened contempt. They left in a storm of muttered curses and wounded pride. I walked out of the courthouse with my lawyer, feeling nothing. Not joy, not anger, just relief, like a rope had finally loosened around my ribs. But the aftermath, the real aftermath, was still waiting for me. 2 months passed. 2 long, strange, echoing months where my life felt like a house after a storm. Still standing, but missing shingles, furniture soaked, windows cracked. Nothing dangerous, just damaged. The online chaos faded first. The crying selfies stopped. The accusatory captions vanished. The GoFundMe disappeared without a trace. People stopped sending me screenshots. Mutual friends slowly drifted into 2 groups. Those who quietly came back, and those who stayed loyal to the version of events where Ryan was the tragic victim and I was some ice-hearted villainess. And honestly, I didn't chase anyone. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain. People believe what they want. And I finally understood that was okay. The house felt too big for one person, though. Too quiet. Too full of old echoes. So I rented a room to my college friend Jake after his lease ended across town. He was funny, clean, and, most importantly, had zero interest in stirring chaos. He helped me repaint the living room a calm sage green. We rearranged the furniture, replaced the bedroom curtains with thick, light-blocking ones, removed the last traces of Ryan's decor, his posters, his bar cart, the ugly lamp he'd insisted was retro. The house slowly started to feel like mine again. Not ours. Mine. My therapist helped too. I started seeing Dr. Kellerman about a month after the proposal disaster. She had warm eyes and blunt honesty, 2 qualities I didn't realize I needed until I was sitting on her couch, fiddling with a tissue I didn't want to use, saying, "He laughed when I was on one knee." She didn't sugarcoat anything. "That's cruelty," she said simply. "Not confusion. Cruelty." The word stunned me. Cruelty. It wasn't one I'd allowed myself to consider. I'd been cycling through humiliation, anger, guilt, numbness, but cruelty, that made it concrete, nameable, something I could set down and walk away from. "He was not your partner," she said. "He was someone who loved being adored by you. Very different things." I blinked hard. Didn't cry. Not then. But something inside me cracked open enough to breathe again. Every session after that, she handed me phrases that stuck like stones in my pocket. "You don't need someone to validate your intentions. Love doesn't require humiliation as a prerequisite. Boundaries are not punishments, they're mirrors. Closure isn't something they give you, it's something you take." My favorite was this: "Don't confuse consistency with compatibility. He was consistently there, but not aligned with you." That one burned. In a good way. A month later, I adopted a dog. A German Shepherd mix with enormous ears and a ridiculous tail wag that made his whole body wiggle. Jake named him Rocket because he ran like a missile and had approximately 6 brain cells, all devoted to enthusiasm. Rocket became the companion I didn't know I needed. A living alarm clock, a small protector. A reminder that joy didn't always have to be complicated. And he never laughed at me. Not even when I was on the floor in old pajamas trying to teach him, sit. Then, one random Tuesday evening, I saw Ryan again. I was in the frozen foods aisle at the grocery store, debating between 2 brands of blueberries. Rocket was in the car, snoring in the back seat like a chainsaw. Jake had texted me asking for ice cream. I turned a corner, and there he was. Ryan, holding a basket, wearing work clothes, looking normal. Not devastated, not broken, not destroyed. Just a man buying pasta on a Tuesday. For a moment, we locked eyes. His expression flickered, surprise, embarrassment, something like bitterness. But he said nothing. And I said nothing too. We passed each other like strangers. No confrontation, no apology, no dramatic ending. Just quiet. I didn't even look back. Later in the parking lot, I sat in my car for a minute, Rocket's big head resting on my shoulder, and realized something shocking. That moment felt like closure. Not the kind where someone begs forgiveness or delivers a heartfelt confession. Not the type that wraps everything in a neat, emotional bow. This was quieter, simpler, more honest. Two people who once shared a life, now sharing nothing. No hostility, no longing, no need. Just absence. And for the first time in months, the absence didn't feel like failure. It felt like peace. I thought that would be the end of it. Until I got one last email. From his father. From the same account he'd used to threaten me at work. Subject, final warning. I sighed and opened it. It was exactly what I expected. Another threat about legal action. Another blaming paragraph about ruining his son's life. Another attempt to intimidate me into regretting choices I'd made to protect myself. I forwarded it to my lawyer. He sent back a cease and desist within the hour. Mark never contacted me again. Now, months later, this is where I am. I have my house, my job, a roommate who doesn't drain me, a dog who thinks I hung the moon, and peace. A kind of peace I didn't know I'd been craving. People ask sometimes, friends, co-workers, even Dr. Kellerman, if I'd ever take Ryan back if he apologized. I don't hesitate anymore. No, I tell them, not because I'm angry, not because I'm bitter, because I believe him. I believe who he showed me he was when things mattered. Someone who laughs at vulnerability. Someone who plays victim when consequences arrive. Someone who confuses entitlement with love. Someone who thinks commitment is a trap. Someone who weaponizes sympathy and shame. That's not someone I will ever build a life with. Not in this lifetime. Not even if he showed up with a choir and a handwritten apology and a time machine. Some doors close, some doors lock. Some doors disappear entirely. That chapter ended the moment he laughed. The moment I stood up. The moment I walked out. The moment I kept walking. Next week, I have a date. A friend of a friend. Nothing serious. We're meeting for coffee, not destiny. I'm not expecting fireworks. Just a conversation. A chance to remember that connection doesn't have to mean sacrifice. Maybe it'll go well, maybe it won't. But here's what I do know. I will never again kneel for someone who thinks my heart is a joke. I will never again ask for love from someone who enjoys withholding it. I will never again mistake shared time for shared values. I'm not healed, not completely, but I'm learning. I'm growing. And for the first time in a long time, I'm living a life that's actually mine. No laughter at my expense. No humiliation disguised as honesty. No battles on my own living room floor. Just me, Rocket, a house full of fresh paint, and a future I get to choose. And that's enough.